After Nexon and Neeple's recent announcement that they were canceling Project BBQ, one of our most anticipated anime MMOs, and instead transitioning the game over into a Korean Elden Ring, players, myself included, were dismayed, were disappointed, disheartened. And while it will no longer be an MMO and could very well potentially be a fantastic Elden Ring knockoff, Dungeon Fighter Online itself still is, and so is Dungeon Fighter Overkill. Hey, my name is STIX, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about how a title within the Dungeon Fighter universe that just released has absolutely broken records in the market. This is a title that I'm sure none of you ever expected to see on this channel, and a game that I'm sure none of you ever anticipated seeing hit such grandiose numbers like this a mere week after launching. Quick shout out to our patrons over on Patreon. This allows you to directly support us if you're interested. Every patron will have their name appear at the beginning of every single YouTube video, and you'll be immortalized in the MMO genre forever. P.S. We're going to be streaming over on Twitch in just 2 hours at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and would love to have you keep us company if you have the chance, so come on over. Now, if you were not already aware, I've discussed this countless times in literally every top 10 most populated MMOs in each respective year video I've done. I've discussed this whenever I have talked about Dungeon Fighter Online specifically, but the game Dungeon Fighter is actually the most densely populated MMORPG in the entire world. I am not exaggerating. It has billions of players globally, which, as a small point of reference, Final Fantasy XIV has 25 million players globally, and WoW is estimated to have approximately 100 million players globally. The cumulative total of two absolutely gargantuan MMOs combined make up a single-digit percentage of active players present within Dungeon Fighter Online. WoW and Final Fantasy XIV also have a combined total of, at best, a couple million active players playing each month. You want to know how many players were reportedly actively playing Dungeon Fighter Online this month alone? 850 million. 850 million players logging in to this game in the month of March 2022. There is a very evident reason why Neeple and Nexon are so focused on expanding the Dungeon Fighter intellectual property with Project BBQ, which is now Project AK, Dungeon Fighter Overkill, Dungeon Fighter Duel, and Dungeon Fighter Mobile. And while Project AK is far from being in a fully playable form, Dungeon Fighter Overkill is expected to release at an undisclosed time in 2022. Dungeon Fighter Duel is holding its open beta with a global release in just a couple months, and Dungeon Fighter Mobile is unfortunately the topic of today's discussion. But don't close out of the video yet. This is very important information, especially pertaining to all of the Dungeon Fighter games that are going to be coming out over the course of the next year or two. Now, regardless of whether or not you have been eagerly anticipating Dungeon Fighter Mobile is completely irrelevant. It is a Dungeon Fighter game, and that name alone carries a weight to it that will accrue the interest of many. Dungeon Fighter Mobile officially revealed to be releasing on March 24th, 2022. Over 1.2 million players had pre-registered for the game ahead of its release, with the title reaching the #1 most popular game on the Apple Store before having even launched. Fast forward to the 24th, the official launch day, concurrency for Dungeon Fighter Mobile hit over 1 million active players. A whole million players the day that it launched. This launched to numbers that were comparable to Lost Ark. And Lost Ark was advertised by Amazon Game Studios. They had every single big name on Twitch advocating for it. And it was a game that has been anticipated for over 4 years now. Yet Nexon's mobile game, on its first day, managed to garner the same kind of numbers with the pull of its name alone. These numbers alone were the highest among Nexon's titles, setting an entirely new record for them. And honestly, I'm sure Nexon would have been perfectly satisfied if they never saw any numbers that went beyond this. However, we did. Several days after releasing on the 29th specifically, Dungeon Fighter Mobile managed to secure the #2 spot on both the Google Play Store and Apple Store in terms of raw sales and downloads. This was a monumental accomplishment. This game managed to dethrone massive titans like Lineage M on the Play Store, and both Odin Valhalla Rising and FIFA Online on the App Store. A mere 2 days later, on the 31st, it acquired #1 on the Play Store, surpassing and dethroning both Lineage M and Lineage W, which again are NCSoft's titans of the genre. A week after launching, Dungeon Fighter Mobile managed to simultaneously dethrone the 2 largest mobile games on the market, but also earned more than any other title in the month of March, all within a few days of releasing. This, I guarantee you, is an outcome that Nexon or Neepal ever saw coming, yet at the same time goes to show you how powerful the Dungeon Fighter intellectual property is, that even with the limited advertising that they did for this game, this franchise is capable of outperforming a game like Lost Ark or New World or an entirely separate, incredibly popular franchise like Lineage. Now, as I noted earlier, you might not be anticipating Dungeon Fighter Mobile. I'm not personally excited for it at all. I'm not overly fond of mobile games really in any capacity. There are a few really good ones out there, and there are honestly a few mobile games and a few different cross-platform games that I am eagerly looking forward to. I'm not going to immediately come out and say, no, I think every single mobile game lacks any kind of originality. I think every mobile game is absolute garbage, because that's a lie. But for the most part, they're generally low quality, low effort, carbon copies of one another with highly predatory business models, preying off of the weak-minded and those of us with severe addiction issues. While Dungeon Fighter Mobile is likely to follow that very same route, and it is, do not delude yourself into thinking that it isn't. This is Nexon we're talking about. They publish some of the most pay-to-win garbage out there. While this game will likely follow suit, I know for a fact it is going to be a monolithic success for the franchise. I can only hope that Project AK, that Dungeon Fighter Overkill, and Duel do not follow suit. Regardless, these numbers are too large to ignore. They're too large for Nexon to ignore, and despite me not being a fan, is still an accomplishment that needs recognition. Now, if you're as disappointed in Project BBQ being canceled as I am, I have a video about what we can expect for the title going into the future, and I have a separate video on Dungeon Fighter Duel and its beta test right here.